Who that nation? How you doing? Come on in. Take a seat. Sit back. Relax. Put your feet up. Grab a drink. And let's talk Saints football. Y'all know what time it is. Time to keep it real. Let's go. Who that nation? It's your boy, Dope 17.
And Coach Rock.
And we got a special guest in the building, baby. He don't need no introduction. He's the host of the Locked On Saints podcast. He's a member of the Locked On NFL podcast. He writes the Saints Wire for USA Today. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big keeping it real. Who that family? Welcome to the one and only, baby, Mr. Ross Jackson. Welcome, Ross.
What's good, family? I appreciate y'all so much for having me on, man. Hey, look, man. First of all, your intro is fire. Second of all, that video. Oh yeah, yo, that video intro got me so hyped for football to be back. We are so close. We are so close, gentlemen.
Oh, we close. Oh, we close, Ross. We are so close, man. We are so close, man. All right. In the chat, Randy Tatum, how you doing? Come on in. Derek L, how you doing, family? Come on in. Family, tonight's a big night. We about to talk it up and chop it up with Ross, baby. Tonight, we're going to talk about and break down the Saints 2022 defense. We also have to look back at last year's defense. We know this offseason, the Saints lost both starting safeties. But did they upgrade with the two replacements that they had? Some pundits are telling us that the Saints did not upgrade, that they actually, the two gentlemen that they brought in are on the decline. But we're going to discuss that and more with Ross and you. We want to know if you have any questions for Ross, put them in the chat, family. Ain't nothing but love, baby. We here tonight. We about to party tonight. So, Coach Rock, how you doing today, baby?
What's going on, man? Hoping everybody had a good day today.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Man, it's been hot, man. It's hot up in Texas, man.
Hey, it's been hot in Louisiana, too. I'll tell you that.
Man, it's crazy out here, man. But, yeah, man. So Ross, man, let me ask you, what got you started into journalism, man?
Oh man, that's a great question. So I played football when I was younger, and it's something I was always been passionate about. Like I loved the game. Played wide receiver, played safety, and in my time, in terms of getting ready and trying to figure out like what it was that I wanted to do, I knew that football wasn't going to be able to be the answer, right? Like I was going to have to find something else around that. So I started helping out with coaching and things like that a little bit, which I think comes off in the show every now and then. And sometimes I'm no Coach Rock, you know what I'm saying? But I've been trying, you know? And so, doing a little bit of work around all that and everything. And then I ended up following my way into actually working in live theater. So I've done everything from Broadway, off-Broadway, national tours, shows out of the country, things like that. Okay. And I kind of worked in that spectrum for a little bit. And so while I was looking for kind of this extra thing to focus on while I was working on that, I started working on journalism. And so I did some technical theater writing. I did some theater reviewing, things like that. And then I thought, man, you know what would be really super dope is if I could find a way to blend all of this together and
Right.
put myself back into sports some way or another. So I started doing like some TV production and things like that. That didn't quite work out the way that I wanted to. But then I saw like there was a position that was open to start writing for like some, it was a blog that some friends of mine started. Tyler McClatchy, Alex Salas, these guys over at what was originally All Saints blog turned into Section 600 after a while. And then that turned into Canal Street Chronicles, and then picked up into Locked On after some time. Once I got behind a microphone, David Locke giving me an opportunity, believing in you, boy, giving it an opportunity to come through and do a daily show. So it just picked up from passion, man. Like, it's and just, finding a microphone and figuring out that I had something to say, had a voice to say it with, and finding ways to be able to do it in a way that was constructive, that fit the journalism spectrum, and was able to be something that people enjoyed from a wide spectrum. And so I was fortunate enough just to have the right people believe in me at the right time, man. That's really what it was.
Man, that's great. That's great, man. And Coach, you got any question?
No, I'm just sitting there like a sponge, absorbing.
Yeah.
That's the way to be, man. Like I had a mentor when I was in undergrad who told me that exact phrase, and I think we hear it from playing the game and from coaching too all the time. Is be a sponge, right? Every time there's information to be had, soak it up, find a way to do it. And then the other piece of advice that I got that was huge for me, I tweeted it out the other day too, was don't wait for any safety nets, just leap. Just leap. So that's what I've been doing my entire life, man. It's just been a series of leaping.
Gotcha. Right. Man. And also, man, you know, Ross, I've been following you for like the last 2 years, man. And like, you're one of the people along with yourself, Big Q, TJ, my boy Hoodie Jew. Shout out to Hoodie Jew, man. You guys, man, some of the people that inspired me, and that's why I'm sitting here today, man. And I'm not gonna lie, man. When I got that tweet back from you, man, I thought I was being punked. You know what I'm saying?
You thought I just wanted to show up?
Yeah, man. I was like, man, I know. Like, I was so excited. I told my wife, man. My wife was like, man, ain't no way. I'm like, yeah, I'm telling you, I think it's him. But,
that's so
man.
Dope,
it's great to have you here, man. And man, let's have some fun with. Hey, family, in the chat, let's go. We got a question, Ross, coming from Mr. Derek L. And Derek's question is, do you think we're waiting until after we get news on AK suspension before we make a move at running back?
I don't think so. I don't think they're necessarily waiting to find out about the suspension, just because like this case has already been continued twice, meaning postponed on 2 different occasions. Right. The first time was because Kamara's defense didn't have any evidence to review, so they were like, well, what you want us to do? And then so they ended up pushing that back. Then when the second time that they ended up pushing back was because they got the evidence but didn't have enough time before the hearing to review it. And then so now it got continued. That's why we're waiting until August now. Waiting until August to sign a running back probably isn't the situation. I think more what it is, or I mean, you got the hearing. Is that going to be continued again? What's going to come of the hearing? Will that take you to trial? Like, there's still more of the legal process that has to unfold. So I think so much of this process is still left to go that really, I think the Saints there's just no reason to panic. There's no reason to be in a rush right now. I think they want to get a look at the guys that they have in the building once they get out to training camp, and then bring in guys for more than 3 days at a time, which if you look at the OTA sessions, 3-day periods, you look at mandatory minicamp, a 3-day period, it's not enough time to really get a look at David Johnson and decide that that's what you want to spend money on, right? So do it over at training camp when you have an opportunity to bring in more of these guys. The Saints have done this year in and year out. They always bring in veteran linebackers. They always bring in veteran running backs. There's always new faces at those positions throughout training camp. So I think that's really what it is just making sure that they have the time to invest to make what they feel would be the right decision, as opposed to specifically waiting around for the suspension itself.
All right. So with the David Johnson situation, do you think it was just a money thing with David Johnson?
It could be, right? Like it's a couple of things. And, when you talk about money with the New Orleans Saints, you're always talking about more than just the digits, right? You're always talking about more about like what's behind the scenes for these guys too. What's the role going to be, right? And so I think that when you think about what the Saints are looking for, you're not looking for somebody that's going to come in 1-for-1, snap for snap to replace Alvin Kamara if he's suspended. Right. You're looking to replace Alvin Kamara with a committee, as opposed to replacing 100% of Alvin Kamara snaps within a committee. So if you think of AK as being a guy that's going to get 70% of snaps, Mark Ingram's probably getting the other 30, maybe 20, and somebody else getting 10. Like, that's probably what your share is going to be. But then when you're trying to replace Alvin Kamara, then you're really looking for like 40% of the snaps from Mark Ingram, 40% of the snaps from somebody else, 20% of the snaps from somebody else. You're going to a little bit more of that like Mike Bell, Pierre Thomas kind of approach, right?
Gotcha.
So I think that becomes the parts where you're just trying to find like who's that guy that's going to play 20 to 40% of snaps, and what are you really willing to put in terms of a price tag on that relative to the role, kind of like what happened with Latavius Murray. They knew that his role was going to decline. They wanted him to take the pay cut to reflect what his new role was going to be. He, I think, wisely did not want to take that pay cut. He got his opportunity to go somewhere else. He went to Baltimore, all of that. Now he's still a free agent. So there's some connective tissue there in terms of some of the guys that are still out there. There's familiarity with him and Devontae Freeman, who spent training camp with the team last year. So those were a couple of guys that I would definitely watch to potentially come in and fill that role too.
So let me ask you this. As far as Murray goes, do you think he would really consider coming back, or you think there may be some feelings in the play?
Look, I've been surprised before by this team's ability to just outright cut a player, move on from him, and still get them to show up a season later. So I think back to Jonathan Williams. Y'all remember Jonathan Williams, a running back that they went in and out with a whole bunch of times. He was such a surprise the last time he came back to the team. I wouldn't be surprised, like if they make the pitch strong enough and that's really, really what they want and they can see the role for him and he's not getting an opportunity elsewhere. If he wants to be on a football field and they're the opportunity he has to get on a football field, any hard feelings like that are going to dissolve for the opportunity to get back out on the field.
So you speak of Jonathan Williams. I kind of look at Devine Ozigbo as today's Jonathan Williams because he's off and he's on back on. He's back and forth. Got anything, Coach Rock?
I'm just listening, man. I'm just listening.
He's that sponge. He's the sponge. He's sponging. He's just soaking it all up. You know what I'm saying? But yeah. Now, Ross, I have a theory. I know Dwayne Washington mainly is on this team because of special teams.
Correct.
Now, Abram Smith from Baylor, linebacker, and he has special teams experience.
Yep.
I strongly believe that if Abram Smith can show up and have a strong camp on special team as well as relieving Alvin and Mark, I think he replaces Dwayne Washington on this team.
I think you're right. I think that is the most direct competition at the position. Like you mentioned, Abram Smith was at Baylor for 3 years, but the first 2 years he played linebacker. He understands how to read what an offense is doing. He knows how blockers get set up from the run game with him being a lifelong running back. And then, he got that great running back opportunity last year and made good on it with 257 carries, over 1,600 yards, and then 12 rushing touchdowns. And so, he did a fantastic job with that Baylor offense, but you're right. His defensive acuity is something that's going to translate really well to special teams. And I think that makes him the most direct competition for Dwayne Washington. I think you're absolutely right.
Okay.
So let me ask a question. So since we're on the offensive side of the ball, so me looking at it from a coaching perspective, do you think? I know a lot of people say Sean Payton had a great mind, but do you think, because when you go back to the Saints Super Bowl year, the Saints had a real strong receiving core, and then it seemed like something happened where he went to just this one primary receiver type thing. Do you think that hurt them from winning more Super Bowls? And I noticed since he's gone, I noticed Dennis Allen really addressed it where they have more quality receivers now.
Yeah, I think the way that I would look at it is that the inability to repopulate the wide receiver room didn't come down to really a lack of not wanting to, right? Like they tried to trade for Odell Beckham Jr. They tried to sign Odell Beckham Jr. The next year they tried to trade for Odell Beckham Jr. again. They tried to sign Odell Beckham Jr. They brought in Emmanuel Sanders. They spent some time trying to get Adam Humphries. Like they tried to fill out that wide receiver room, but for whatever reason, they ended up in a situation where they ended up with, quote unquote, the guys in the room. And what are you going to do other than say, we like the guys in the room, right? You're not going to say, yeah, we wish they were better. That from a coaching perspective, right? Like you're never going to do that to your guys. And so I think that the Saints have been hurting at the wide receiver position and have clearly had trouble producing there. Particularly you look at last year, bottom of the league in the NFL when it came to passing yards, only 30th in the league when it came to passing attempts. Now there's injuries and things like that to account for that are part of that conversation. You expected Michael Thomas to be a part of that team at some point, and he unfortunately wasn't able to. That changes this season. So I do think that the Saints were hampered a little bit by their wide receiver room, but it never stopped them from being able to produce over on the offensive side. Even when it was Emmanuel Sanders, they were still able to put up, and they still produced. Even when it was Ted Ginn Jr., Teddy Bridgewater produced with Ted Ginn Jr. You know what I mean? And so I think that like they found ways to continue to do it. It wasn't necessarily exactly what they wanted, but even that 2018 team still had things that you wish you could have improved over on that side. You think about that Super Bowl team. What was the big thing you had that year? Lance Moore, right? You had like a fantastic slot option that could move around. You didn't really have that in 2018. And so even when they were 2 deep, you wanted them to be 3 deep. Now they're finally 3 deep. And I think that helps. And I think the thing that's really nice about it is that Dennis Allen, he has done something. And I think, Coach, you'll recognize this, that I think good coaches do. Good coaches bring in other coaches that make them better where they're not, right?
Yeah.
He's a defensive guy. He brought in Cody Burns, who's a fantastic developer. He added Bob Bicknell, who helped to guys like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd translate from the NFL to being premier wide receivers in the NFL. Or excuse me, translate from college, my apologies, to being those premier wide receivers in the NFL. And he built up the personnel on the offensive side so that Jameis had the weapons that he needed, so that Jameis had those pieces around him, building around the quarterback, and committed really early to the quarterback, right? You got the contract done, you got the contract signed, and what was one of the first things Dennis Allen said about it? It ain't going to be Taysom, right? Like he committed to Jameis right away and then built the team around him. And I think all those things are a part of which bringing in, Doug Marrone, somebody that's familiar with the system, familiar with the team wants to be, familiar with Pete Carmichael, coming and being a fantastic developer on the offensive line, somebody that isn't going to be precious about the guys and where they have been on that offensive line. It's going to be willing to shake it up if he needs to, right? I think all of that stuff is something Dennis Allen did really, really well, and kind of is one of the reasons why he was able to make the changes that maybe we haven't seen over the course of the past few years.
Okay. So do you think that Taysom days at quarterback are done and he's just going to find a natural position now as far as like tight end or whatever?
I still think that you're going to see a couple of quarterback snaps from him. Like, you're not going to lose that quarterback power game when you know how impactful it can be, specifically on like third down situationally. I think that, those in the read option plays, I think those things are still of value to you in terms of your ability to be able to pick up short yardage and, be that guy, that can do something on like a 2nd and 1. Right. But I don't think you give him as many opportunities to pass. And I think that you give him more opportunity to be on the field at the same time as Jameis Winston. You want to put the best 11 players out on the field, down in and down out. And the Saints will always rotate a bunch with their personnel groups. But I think opportunities that you have to have Jameis and Taysom out on the field at the same time, once Taysom's healthy and ready to go, I think you take advantage of those and utilize him in the passing game. You think back to that Washington game last year, where unfortunately he took that brutal hit that knocked him out for a couple of games, but he was, up until that point, impactful as a pass catcher. And I think you look for him to have that role again in 2022.
Okay.
Derek L has another question. He says, I still have faith in Troutman, but I saw Cam recruiting Eric Ebron. Would he be a good fit until Troutman develops?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, I think when you have that tight end room the way that it is right now, there's no wrong way to go. Right? Like, you're always looking for ways to improve. And one of the things I talked about with what has taken the New Orleans Saints from those 2014, 15, and 16 years on defense to where they are now, to where like they're shaping up to be another top 10 scoring defense for a 3rd year in a row, is by not settling, right? By always making sure that you're addressing and creating competition at positions. And I think that tight end is one of the spots where they could absolutely do that. So whether it's Eric Ebron or whether it's like my third cousin, Vinny, like, you find somebody and you bring him in and you keep stepping up the competition at that position for sure.
Okay.
My dog horse at the tight end position is Lucas Krull. I'm actually hoping. I'm still kind of wondering why he wasn't drafted.
Yeah, I might have been an age thing, like the same thing with Abram Smith. I think Smoke Monday got hit by that too. Like, there's just something about like breakout age that a lot of these NFL scouts get really, really married to. And it has some weird impacts on the draft sometimes. And I think that those types of things may end up impacting. You're talking about like development time and development potential and all those other things. But when you can land him as undrafted free agent, the Saints, I think, pulled together a really, really good UDFA class this year, undrafted free agent class this year, with Lucas Krull included. I think he would definitely be somebody to watch. I'm excited to see him during camp.
Me too. And
so
go ahead, Coach.
So do you think with the drafting of Trevor Pennington, where he flip-flop to the other side and possibly move Ramczyk to the side to protect?
Yeah, I think James Hurst makes it so that the Saints don't have to do that. And I think one of the things you want to do is that if you're going to have a question mark at tackle already, don't create another question mark at tackle, right? So if you're looking at flipping Ryan Ramczyk, he was a career left tackle when he played at Wisconsin. So he has the experience to do it, but you are asking him to do something other than what has made him the highest paid, one of the highest paid tackles in the NFL to this point. And if you're already going to be asking the question about Trevor Penning and his technique, taking him from the left side to the right side and asking him to mirror all of his movements and flip his movements might not be the best decision either for his own development. So I think that right now what you do is you let Trevor Penning get his opportunity at left tackle. If he doesn't get it right away, no big deal. You've got James Hurst that they're very comfortable with at that spot, and then you're able to continue to move forward until he develops, and then you can slide him in. And then otherwise you bring him in as kind of the tackle eligible left tackle when you want to sling him in and let him do what he does really, really well, which is, beat up a defensive lineman in the run game or something like that. So he builds that confidence as opposed to moving him over and asking him, all right, now you have to mirror everything, flip everything, and relearn everything, and also get all these fundamentals fixed up. I think that puts him in a worse position. The thing that I like about Trevor Penning, he's really, really good at all the things you can't teach, and the things that he needs help with are the things that you can teach. So that puts him in a good position with a developer like Doug Marrone.
Okay. And that's the next thing. I think Doug Marrone coming back was one of the biggest hirings this offseason. And my main thing with Doug Marrone is, can you please do something with Cesar Ruiz? There were times last year when this young man didn't block anyone. This is the National Football League. You've been playing since Pop Warner. Even if you don't know the play, you know one thing: block someone. But I feel like he's playing out of position.
Yeah, I mean he was a center his entire time at Michigan, right? And he was a really, really good one, a really smart center, like barely missed on any of his protection calls and things like that. Really, really a good center. And so you are asking him to play out of position. And I think that's one of the reasons why you bring Doug Marrone in, is that you give him an opportunity to work with a guy like Cesar Ruiz and help him develop. He's a really, really good developer. That's the word I'll always use when it comes to Doug Marrone. And I think that's something that the Saints need and something that they really want at those coaching spots, particularly over on the offensive side at wide receiver in particular. You saw the moves that they made there, and over on the offensive line where you have him, and then you have a guy that developed himself and that himself developed into the system in Zach Strief that's operating as your assistant offensive lineman. So he's going to be working pretty closely with Trevor Penning, which is going to give Marrone the opportunity to focus on the other guys, Cesar Ruiz included. So you are asking him to play out of position. And he came in that weird 2020 year where there was like not really a training camp, not really on the OTAs. Right. And so even that transition was, cut short in terms of his opportunity to really be able to develop in there, because in the short training camp period that he had, he missed half of it with injury. And so I think you're probably really looking at a guy that, by all intents and purposes, is kind of a year behind, not himself a year behind, but a year behind because of the development time that was allotted to him and the way that kind of COVID year was really strange. I think that operates as a disadvantage to him. And I think Doug Marrone should be able to help him overcome that.
Now, another person on the offensive line that's very intriguing to me, and he showed flashes last year in the brief time he played, was Landon Young. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on Landon Young as the backup to Ryan Ramczyk?
Yeah, what I really like about Landon Young is that he played in that Kentucky offensive line. They called it the Big Blue Wall. So he's been playing in the SEC. He's been playing against NFL defensive linemen for a long time. That's, you know what I mean? He's been playing against SEC defensive linemen, and therefore he basically has NFL experience. So I like his tenacity. I like his, his movement ability, things like that. I think I think he could be a little bit lighter on his feet, stuff like that. Like little things that you can adjust, that you can clean up a little bit, particularly in the style of play that you do. I feel like he's a little bit more of a power guy, but you can get him into the zone action and stuff. It was unfortunate that he had that injury that first game that he really got the opportunity to be out there, but I liked what you saw from him. He even came out to the press conference after that game before we found out like, oh, he's injured and out for the season on some, and so it was kind of wild to see all that. But yeah, no, I think that he's somebody that's going to continue to develop. They clearly like him a lot. He has left tackle, right tackle versatility, which is something we know the Saints love on the offensive line, is versatility when it's already allotted to them.
Right.
So I think that he has a really good opportunity there. I think him and Calvin Throckmorton are going to be really valuable assets behind the starting offensive line that people will end up talking about, by season's end.
Were you impressed with Throckmorton last year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the things that you like about him a lot is the fact that you put him anywhere. Put the guy anywhere. I think that his football IQ and his acuity on the offensive line is something that's really, really hard to find. And that versatility that he has is really, really hard to find. He's kind of like a Senio Kelemete type, who the Saints brought back during mini camp. We got a little look at him and stuff. It was a nice little reunion there. And so that's one of the things that I really liked about him. Is he the perfect offensive lineman? Is he a starting offensive lineman for you? No, probably not. But he's somebody that's able to plug in at either guard spot, at either tackle spot. He could probably play center for you if you needed him to. Like my favorite story about Calvin Throckmorton, they call him Doc Throck his entire time while he was at Oregon because of how damn smart he is. And one of the things that, one of the stories that I really like about him is that he was a late addition to his draft year Senior Bowl. Okay. So he didn't show up until like the first day of practice, got handed a playbook and then practiced all 3 days and then played the game on Saturday without any issue. Like he learns the playbook quickly. And so I think those types of things are the things that's going to keep you around in that New Orleans Saints system, along with the versatility. And I think he plays well at the positions that they put him in so far.
Another lineman, and I'm staying on the offensive line because on paper, everyone's excited about the skill positions, but nothing works unless that offensive line gets back to being one of the top offensive lines in the league. We know Drew Brees had a lot to do with it because of how smart he was. He knew exactly where he was going with the ball, but I still think we have the capabilities of having a top 5 offensive line. With that being said, another interesting signing is Forrest Lamp. Now, with Forrest Lamp, is he mainly a guard, or can he be a center or a swing tackle?
Can I just say yes? Okay. I think he's probably one of your guys that's like an interior swing. Right, you can play him at either guard position. I assume he could be somebody that could come in and play center as well. I don't think he has a lot of those snaps in his time, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him get that work during training camp. Because otherwise, really, the only 2 guys with center experience that you have are Ruiz and McCoy, and those are 2 guys that are starting on your offensive line. So you kind of need that other depth piece at that really, really important position. So I, wouldn't be surprised to see Forrest Lamp potentially be that guy, but we'll see who ends up getting those. Gerald Hawkins, maybe, I don't know. There's a few other guys that could probably get into that mix, but I think that he gives you that interior swing opportunity for sure.
Do you think in training camp that they experiment with putting Eric McCoy at right guard and putting Cesar at center?
I'm a little hesitant about that, and Zach Strief has been hesitant about that too in the past because that's not the position you want to create a question mark at, and how good Eric McCoy has been for you at center.
Yes,
how good he's been there for you. So I don't, and how important that you want to talk about being smart, like beyond Drew Brees, the other person that made that offensive line as good as it was for a little while was Max Unger, right?
Exactly.
And his ability to be able to make those calls and be a part of that in concert with Drew. So I think that becomes the other piece of it too, is that's the last place you probably want to create any question marks when you're already kind of shuffling around a little bit what those pass protection responsibilities are pre-snap. And so if Eric McCoy can do that, then I think you give him the opportunity. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe if, they give Cesar Ruiz some snaps there during training camp so that, they're working there in terms of him potentially having to step in for injury related purposes or things like that, like you saw early in the 2021 season. And therefore that moves Eric McCoy to the right guard. But I think that's more so just about preparation and things like that than it is about like an actual look at potentially swapping those 2 guys.
And in last show, I had a question for Who That Nation. And my question was, did you miss Andrus Peat? Because a lot of us in Who That Nation do not appreciate what we have in Andrus Peat. Andrus Peat, to me, Ross, is one of the best run blocking guards in the National Football League. Now, sometimes he gets sloppy with his technique and pass protection, but when Pete was out, you can see we was missing a lot. So sometimes we need to appreciate what you have because, like they say, your trash is not trash to someone else.
And that's one of the reasons why Andrews Pete got the contract he got, right? Because Kansas City was ready to pay him a ton of money. And I think when you look at that position, particularly on the interior, it's a hard position to transition from college out of. So there's not a lot of really, really good tackles that are out there. And so you pay the ones that are good. You pay the ones that are more than serviceable. And I think Andrews Pete has been that. I think the issue is that you find out too often what life without him is like. Right.
Yes.
I mean, that becomes the main concern. And that's something that you hope that he's able to show you a little bit more. Now he's coming back from injury over the course of, this offseason and everything. So we'll see how quickly he gets back out on the field. That could cause some shuffling during training camp early on if he's not out there, but we'll see, right? We don't know just yet. And there's no need for the Saints to update on that at all until, unless, Peyton Turner goes and announces to the world on Twitter. That's one thing, right? He has the right to do that, right? But Andrews Pete probably won't do that. And, that's not up to the team to do. So we'll just have to see if he's out on the field or when he gets back out on the field.
Okay. Derek L with another question. He says, I think it would be smart to extend CD early. I don't want to lose him like we did with Marcus Williams. I'm with you. I do not want to lose him.
Yeah, I think that's right. And he's looking for a contract extension. I mean, he's one of those three guys that was named before the season. We know Deontay Hardy and the Saints aren't very close, but they can eventually get to a contract extension. It wouldn't be surprising considering the fact that he's on that RFA tender. Demario Davis got his, right? He's around for 2024 now.
Yes.
And I think CeeDee's probably the other guy, maybe the most likely next guy to get that extension. And it might not happen before the season, right? We watched, Demario Davis 2 years ago get his after that Raiders game early on in the season. We watched Marshawn Lattimore get his right after that Green Bay game to open up the season. He had that fantastic game against Devontae Adams and then went and signed a contract right off the field, right? So I think that just because we don't see it during training camp doesn't mean that it won't happen, but I do think that he's somebody that you get a look at and that hey, that's a future New Orleans Saint for a long time if the Saints can do it right, and he's going to be a leader for this team for a while.
Okay. Yeah, Derek, I think we kind of touched on that already. About Doug helping out Ruiz. We all are in agreement with that. Let's see. Purple Marcus says Mark Ingram is washed.
Rude.
Yeah, that's rude, man. How you gonna talk about the all-time leading rusher in Saints history like that, man?
So Ross, let me ask you this: from just the OTAs, what are maybe one or two players that you've seen that's kind of flying under the radar? Maybe it's undrafted, and you might want to say, hey, let's watch out for them coming up.
I already know, but I'm going to let you explain. I already know.
I'll mention one that I know Nick Underhill has shouted out as well. Safety Justin Evans is a big one. I'll throw him out there real quick. I think that, when you look at that safety position, I know we'll break that down here in a little bit, but when you look at that safety position, you might be without Marcus May for a couple of games, either early on in the season with his DUI case that's set to come to trial. I think it's in August. So there's a chance that you don't see Marcus May at the early portion of the season. Who's the guy that could potentially step in there? I think PJ Williams is certainly one of them, right? We've seen PJ Williams grow as a safety and kind of reset his market there. Right. And so he could be that guy. But I think in terms of the versatility that you look for as somebody that can play down in the box and be a big time hitter, like at A&M, he was a big time hitter. Justin Evans put down some, I mean, he laid some pavement on some guys, right? And so he did some really good stuff. And so I think that and then potentially having a little bit more range too, I think that he would be somebody to watch during training camps. Would be a lot of fun. And then Dolph, I'll give you the guy I think you knew I was going to, wide receiver Dejon Dixon, right?
There we go. There go the name.
Yeah, that's been my dude, man. Like I'm so excited to see him out on the field. One of the things that I love, and I kind of talked about it, I mentioned it on Twitter earlier, Tyrann Mathieu was talking about potentially taking that number 5 to rep the 5th ward, which is where his grandmother grew up and all that, right? I think that like the connection between community and organization has always been really unique in New Orleans, maybe the most unique in across sports. And now you have all of these guys that are from the area, that are from the community itself. It just more deeply entrenches that connection. And Dejon Dixon is an example of that. If I remember correctly, he's an Edna Carr product. Right. And then coming up from there to Nichols, coming up from there to now being in New Orleans, he's repped by a local like New Orleans agent. Like these guys are all get it from the mud type dudes that are part of his team. And so like that's his mentality coming into here too. He's a good pass blocker. Yeah, he's a good run blocker. I'm sure he can contribute to you in the pass game too if you needed him to as an inline guy. At 6'3", 205 pounds, big frame, but somebody that can attack downfield because he's really good with shedding and creating separation naturally with acceleration and deceleration, just getting ahead of some of these guys, but can also make some tough catches for you over the middle. And he is that New Orleans Saints quintessential big build, big bodied receiver. So he'll be one that I think is going to make a bunch of those plays like Emmanuel Butler did years ago during camp, but has the special teams acumen and the run play, the run blocking ability that could actually keep him on the roster, or at least like a commonly elevated practice squad guy.
Okay. Got it. So we have a question from Dariel. Man, Dariel, keep him firing, man. You on fire tonight, man. Any news on Hardy, Harris, and that's my thing. What's going on with Alante Taylor and his agent? What are they looking for? A supermax deal for a second round pick?
Supermax deal. I think that's Alante Taylor's team doing a good job. Like that's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to go to bat for this kid and make sure that he gets as much money as he can, and getting it guaranteed, I think, is a big thing, right? Like this is a kid that was probably expected to be more of a third or a fourth round selection. Saints didn't have a third or a fourth round selection, and they went and grabbed him in the second round. They absolutely love him. And I think that when you look at the role that he could potentially create for himself early on in his career, it's either a starting cornerback or it's a special teams player, right? And those two things can have a massive impact on what his second contract ends up looking like 3 years down the line. And so you go to war for this kid and you get him more guaranteed money so that you, as the agent and as that team, are making sure that he is getting the best deal possible no matter what happens, because he's got those higher guarantees. So no matter what, he's walking away with some good money by the end of his rookie deal. It's a smart move by his representation, and I expect that they'll take this all the way down to the wire, but it doesn't mean that, look, he's been participating in OTAs, he's been around for mandatory mini camps, he was around for rookie mini camp, like he's done all the voluntary stuff as well. He'll be there on the 19th when rookies report, I do believe, and they'll just get they'll get the contract done when they get the contract done. But it's in their best interest to get the contract done sooner rather than later at this point, because he'll be out on the field, which means that there's always the concern of injury around that. The Hardy extension is one that has been reported that they're pretty far apart, the team and the player, in terms of getting that extension done. And I think you look at contracts like Marcus Valdez-Scantling, who got $11 million per year, 3 years, 33 with Kansas City and stuff like that. He's never had a receiving season over 700 yards or whatever. And so I think that, you look at what Deontay Hardy did last year as effectively becoming what was early on your most consistent wide receiver. You see him get a greater role every year on the offense, and I don't blame him for going to bat for himself. And same thing, right? That's his representation doing a good job, doing exactly what they should do. So the good news is that he gets money one way or another on that RFA tender, and then he hits the market next year. But I think that like if there's interest in him wanting to be in New Orleans, I think New Orleans is gonna try to find a way to make that happen.
Right. All right, Ross. Let me get this out the way from a family member. This is from Jay Hitt. He hosts the Hit Zone, and Jay Hitt, he's really insane. I love him, but he's insane. This man believes that the Saints would trade Sean Payton for a 5th round draft pick.
No.
Now he's not only crazy. My co-host, Coach Rock, said that he believes it'll be a 1 or 3 in cash consideration. This is not the NBA. We don't need cash. We got a billionaire owner, so I'm just saying. But a first and a 1 and a 3. I like I was saying, the trade with John Gruden, that set the foundation where the compensation for Sean Payton should start. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I think that's probably more akin to it. I think I think they'll push for, which doesn't necessarily mean that they'll get it, but I think they'll push for multiple firsts as being kind of the baseline for that trade. Now, whether or not they get it, we'll see, but it could also be like a first and a second, or a first and a first and a second for the next year or something like that. And then you throw in like 2 seconds or something, right? Like there will be something, but it's going to be multiple picks. A first should be involved in that. This is still somebody that when he comes back, because I personally think he will come back to coaching. And so to me, it's a matter of a when, not if. And so I think that, he's still going to be coming back as one of the most, if not the most innovative offensive coach in the NFL once he gets there. And the teams that are going to be looking for him are going to be teams that don't have coaches anymore, which means they're not going to be great teams. Right. And so I think that you end up saying like, this is the guy that ends up being the difference for the franchise. And so there might be a gap year in between those firsts, right? Like a first in 2023 and then another one in 2025 or something like that, or whatever. Like there might be some gaps in the picks and stuff like that. Can't do cash considerations in the NFL, not allowed to trade or spend money on trades and stuff like that. So, if you take that value or whatever that is to you and turn it into a pick, or add that to what would be the third round pick in that first and third scenario, that probably gets you a little bit closer to what I think that the Saints would end up getting for him. But I do think that they'll get a nice multiple pick haul for, what's going to be a Hall of Fame head coach that's going to end up being able to help to turn around or be the last remaining ingredient to, let's say Brandon Staley loses too many more games for the Los Angeles Chargers. They have everything they need on their roster. And they also have some familiar pieces that Sean Payton knows already, right? Brendan Nugent, Will Clapp, they have guys over there. Joe Lombardi, of course, is over there as their OC. So there's a lot of opportunity for that to potentially be a place where he can land, which wouldn't necessarily be a bad team in 2023 or 2022, but still would end up being able to say, we can give up the draft order because they don't need the young quarterback. They don't need to find the wide receivers. They don't need to find those things. They would be able to give up that one.
Right. The Chargers were one of the teams that I have favored for him to go to because he has the young QB already in place. They have a good defense already. So like you said, if I could see if they struggle this year, at that being a possible landing spot. And also we wouldn't even be having this conversation if everything wouldn't have got blew up on the Miami Dolphins, because the secret handshake that him and Tom Brady had. Brady will be in Miami right now instead of Tampa Bay. For all you Buck fans who now want to talk, but you was quiet as church mouse when Brady retired for 14 days. But that's another story. But yeah, what you got for us, Coach?
No, I'm just listening. I'm just listening in.
Coach. All right, so let's break down the safety position. Now, last year, Marcus Williams had 74 total tackles, 2 intercepts, 8 passes defense, and 1 forced fumble. So we replaced him with Marcus May, and in just 6 games, May had 46 tackles, 26 of which was solo, 1 sack, and 2 passes defense. Now, in his career, he had 6 INTs and 24 passes defense and 4 forced fumbles. So for those who are saying that we downgraded, what is your thought on that?
I mean, I guess it's a wait and see game, but I don't think you did, right? I think the other thing you have to look at when it comes to Marcus May is what was the role that he was asked to play in Robert Saleh's defense, which took him from being a deep coverage safety where he was able to make more impact in terms of his ball skills. And then that brought him down to make more plays in the box and be more of an enforcer, which is something that Marcus Williams really started to pick up on last year. And so I think that, you get the versatility that you want from guys like Tyrann Mathieu and Marcus May, who could start pre-snap one way, roll post-snap another way, or whatever you want. That can be really, really versatile in terms of what you're able to do with disguise coverages a lot more, do what it is that has confused Tom Brady over the course of the past couple of seasons when playing against that New Orleans defense, is their ability to disguise. And so I think that Marcus May adds a little bit of that to you. Marcus May also had, since 2017, the highest forced incompletion percentage in the NFL, with number 2 on that list being Marcus Williams. So it's not all about passes, defense. It's not all about interceptions. It's also how else are you impacting the game? And it's those pass breakups. It's making contact with the receivers as the ball meets their hands. It's those other things that Marcus May is able to do that I think he does extremely well with his range. So I don't think that necessarily you're going to see the same type of production from Marcus May that you saw from Marcus Williams, who's one of the interception leaders since 2017. He's up on that list. But I think that you're also not going to see him asked to play the same role on a consistent basis, and you'll see him and Tyrann Mathieu be a little bit more interchangeable than Marcus Williams and Malcolm Jenkins were able to. That's maybe one of the reasons why you also look at maybe this year being a little bit of an upgrade for them, because of what Dennis Allen's system wants from his safeties and what he'll be able to do now that he wasn't able to do before.
Okay. Now, as far as losing Malcolm Jenkins, when we lost a leader, I call the quarterback of the secondary. We had someone who can line them up, get everybody together. And I don't know how you can do any better when going from Malcolm Jenkins to Tyrann Mathieu, and a lot of national media people are actually saying that Tyrann isn't what he used to be, but he's made 3 consecutive Pro Bowls. He's been an All-Pro 2 of the last 3 seasons. So what is your thought on that?
Yeah, my favorite thing around that is when people say, like, how much gas does he have left in the tank? Does Tyrann Mathieu have left in the tank when he's replacing a player that was impactful in this defense that's 4 years older than he is? Like, don't give me that. Like, find another narrative. Find another narrative. Like, I think you're absolutely right. There was no one better to replace Malcolm Jenkins with than Tyrann Mathieu. There was no one better to add to this defense, the secondary, than Tyrann Mathieu for New Orleans. And I think they did a really great job with that movement, because you end up having a leader, you have a really good communicator, you have somebody that can help set up coverages and that understands the NFL extremely well, right? That has played all of those different roles. And I think that ends up being a really, really good replacement for you in terms of getting somebody instead of Malcolm Jenkins.
Tyrann has always been like that. I coached Tyrann since a kid, a park ball. And even when I went to St. Aug, Tyrann was in his senior year, but he's always just been a natural leader, very instinctive, very smart, and very tough, coming out the 7th Ward, he's a tough, hard-minded kid, and very smart.
Yeah, and now he has the maturation behind all of that, right? Like, he was already that guy, that he was the smartest guy in the room. He was the vocal leader in the room and everything. Like, he was always that kid, but now he has grown into the man that he feels is ready to come back to this community and have a positive impact, right? Like, I think that's something that's really special about what Tyrann Mathieu brings. When he did his introductory press conference, I asked him about his leadership role, and he and Jarvis Landry, I asked them both the same question about leadership. And they both talk about how it's a part of their DNA. Like, it's just who they are and their ability to be able to come in. And now he comes in as effectively the veteran leader of this secondary, right? Now that you look at, these other guys, he's the most experienced player in the secondary in terms of NFL experience. And now he gets to translate all of that to a very talented secondary that will surround him.
You know what's funny, Ross? You say he's the man. Every time I see Tyrann, you always say, Coach, who the man? Who the man? He always tells me that.
I love that. Is the response that he's the man, or is it that you're the man?
No, he's talking about himself.
Himself. That's what's all right. Like, that's that confidence. Like, you need that in the secondary.
I'm the man. Yeah, he always tells me when I talk to him.
All right. So now let's head to a battle that's going to be, I think it's going to be one of the most interesting. It's going to be the cornerback position opposite Marshawn Lattimore. Me personally, I don't see Paulson Adebo losing his spot. I love the swagger of Alontae Taylor, but I remember all last year in the pre-draft, leading up, you guys were doing the pre-draft mock drafts, and the one person you kept mentioning was Paulson Adebo. Paulson Adebo. So I started looking up film on him, looking at tape on him. And then when I saw he was on the board, I was like, man, are we really about to get this kid? And lo and behold, we got him. And last year, from game 1 on, you saw the maturation of him. He continued to improve every game. A lot of family members want to look at the Atlanta game when he gave up the deep pass to what's his name for Atlanta?
I guess at
Patterson,
right?
Yeah, the Patterson. But from that game on, all you saw was steady improvement. And the last game of the season, that beautiful one-handed intercept, man, it was just icing on the cake, man. It was a thing of beauty. So what's your thought on that battle? And also Warner. I think we have exactly what we need, which is a future budding star in Pete Werner. He's very instinctive. Yep. He's always where he's supposed to be. He's good in the passing game, and he's good against the run. He's just an all-around good football player.
Yeah, I agree. I'll start with that cornerback spot opposite Marshawn. I do think it's a Debo spot to lose, right? Like it's his spot, and he would have to not only be outplayed, but he would have to underperform in order to lose that spot. And I just don't see that happening. Like, Chris Richard has spoken extremely highly of Paulson Adebo, and it's kind of been the word of the night here, but the maturation, which I think is an important element of what makes the Saints defense as good as it is the maturity of this defense to be able to have a play like giving up the big pass to Cordero Patterson, but then come back and be able to still put together a really positive season all throughout, right? Because you have to have, and coach, you'll know this as a corner, you have to have a short memory. You got to forget the good plays and the bad plays. You got to let them go. And so he has that. You've seen that from him. He's a former wide receiver. He's got great ball skills. One-hand interception, all of that, right? So I think that there's all of those pieces that come in that are going to make it to where it's going to be Paulson Adebo's spot to lose. And I love the attitude of Alontae Taylor. I love the fact that Dennis Allen is coming in and saying we're building competition at premier positions. That's what the Saints need to do. That's how they got Janoris Jenkins in the first place, right? That ended up being such a huge and impactful player with them. His full first, only full season with the team. And so I think that it's Paulson Adebo's spot, but I think that he's going to be pushed. He's going to be challenged by not only Alontae Taylor, he might be challenged a little bit by Bradley Roby too. But I think ultimately that's his spot to lose. Pete Werner, I think, is somebody to where, even if they do go out and sign Quan Alexander, I think Pete Werner is your starter next to Demario Davis.
I agree.
I just think that he gives you another Demario Davis-like mind out on the field, and you want that, particularly at the second level. The way that second level has evolved in the NFL over time, Pete Werner gives you a little bit more of what a modern-day linebacker needs to be able to do, which is everything, right? And I think Quan Alexander gives you a really good sideline to sideline coverage guy. There's absolutely no doubt about that in terms of the way that he's able to help you impact the defense. But in terms of what the role is that the Saints may be looking for at that linebacker spot next to Demario Davis, you're probably looking for a more all-around guy these days, as opposed to, you're talking about the versatility that Dennis Allen wants to be able to play with. Pete Werner has that. And I think that that's one of the reasons that ends up making him a really good fit.
All right. Now, you got a question, Coach?
No, I'm just listening in.
Now, another a gentleman kid that's had a good all season in OTAs and I know for a fact would have made the team last year is Bryce Thompson. And coaches went on record as saying the only thing he's looking for from Bryce is consistency.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So I could, and if I'm not mistaken, they were cross training them at safety and also cornerback. I'm not sure if it was in the slot or on the outside. What are your thoughts on Bryce?
Yeah, if I remember correctly, I think it was a little bit more in the slot, if I remember right. But I would have to double check that. But either way, I mean, you want to talk about attitude like this. The Saints love Tennessee Volunteers. The Tennessee Volunteers and Ohio State Buckeyes, like those are the guys, right? You come in pro ready out of both of those in terms of fitting into the Saints system. And I think that Tennessee Volunteers secondary in particular is one of those spots and one of those places where the Saints really, really love the attitude of those guys and what they bring in. And Thompson is somebody that, is kind of like, I mentioned Justin Evans, replace Justin Evans with Bryce Thompson. And it's the same statement, right? He's going to be a guy to watch for sure.
Right.
And he's just going to have to show that he can have that consistency, that he can have that versatility. And some of that just comes with reps. Justin Evans has those reps. He needs to get those reps. And so we'll see how he pans out. I don't think he's going to push for a starting role or anything like that, but he definitely is somebody that brings you really good special teams acumen. And that's somebody that's able to be a little bit more multiple on defense. If he can develop that, additional spot where he's playing a little bit more in the box, playing in the slot, playing a little bit more in the back, playing a little bit more as a drop back safety. I think that those things will absolutely help him at least have a larger role coming in, even if that's on the practice squad, kind of like we mentioned with Dejon Dixon as a matchup based elevation. I think that that's a good spot for him, even if it's not a 53 spot.
Okay. Now, Jaros, let's talk about our cousins, man, the Jackson.
We're all over this place.
We're all over, baby. We're all over.
I'm going on record. You hear me say this first. DeMarco Jackson is going to be in the running for Rookie of the Year.
Wow.
Whoa.
You know who agrees with you, huh? Our homeboy Emory Hunt. He thinks he's going to be up there too. Now you're the first person I've heard to say in the running for Rookie of the Year. I will say that, but he believes that DeMarco Jackson could be the one starting next to Demario Davis. So it's gonna be fun to watch that second level. I still think it's Pete Werner, but look, this kid's talented. He's talented and he's fiery, big time fiery.
Yeah, he sees it and he attacks it, man. He goes, he's downhill, man, and he's sideline to sideline.
Yep.
So what about the young man from Air Force?
So Jordan Jackson, he's a really interesting one, right? He's a really versatile interior defensive lineman that can maybe create a little bit more penetration from you because of his agility, as opposed to his hand-to-hand, his hand fighting and his sheer overpowering of offensive linemen at the next level. Right. And the Saints tend to go more for the overpowering guys, right? You look at guys like Noah Spence and Zach Bond, who have never really caught on as pass rushers in New Orleans. Now they tried to change Zach Bond's role, right? They wanted to move him to an off-ball linebacker. And so far, that hasn't completely panned out. And Noah Spence never really got the opportunity to really get out onto the field with the injuries and stuff like that. He had unfortunate incidents where he was preparing for the season, preparing for training camp, and it was either an Achilles or just call it a leg injury that ended his season. But those guys never really catch on in New Orleans, right? They like the big 6'6", 250 plus pound, 260 plus pound. I'm going to push a tackle into the quarterback's lap type pass rushers and stuff. Peyton Turner, Cam Jordan, Demario Davis. I mean, Demario Davis could do it too. Don't get me wrong, but Marcus Davenport in particular. And the guys are the interior kind of the same. And so look, the thing about Jordan Jackson is that he doesn't have to become a starter to have an impact, because of how much the Saints rotate. Exactly. That rotation on defensive line. And so if he makes the roster, you're going to see him out on the field. So he'll be fun to watch because his style will be different during training camp than the other guys that will be playing at his position. And I think that's going to help him maybe jump off the field a little bit more if he starts to produce there. So
that brings me to the interior lineman. We know David Onyemata that's a lot. We don't even worry about that. ESPN had linked Ndamukong Suh to the Saints. A lot of family members were kind of excited about the possibility of bringing Ndamukong Suh to the Saints. I was not one of those people. He shunned us twice for the Rams and the Bucks. That's enough for me. We don't need him. To me, we don't need him, and I think Katavius Street is an underrated signing by the Saints.
Yeah, I think he has the ability to be kind of like what that Malcolm Brown signing was a couple of years ago, to where, like nobody talked about it. He ended up being huge for New Orleans.
Yes.
Huge for him. I think that what Ndamukong Suh gives you, though, is a little bit more of Malcolm Brown's versatility as being able to play from 0 to 4, being able to play as a nose tackle, being able to play as a 1 tech, being able to play 2 inside, 3 tech, and even out to 4 if you need them to. Right. So I think that versatility, kind of like what you have with David Onyemata, I think that mirrors that. Can Katavius Street do that? We'll see, right? He'll get the opportunity for sure. But I would personally think that Ndamukong Suh would be a good signing, kind of like what we just talked about with Latavius Murray and Jonathan Williams and Devon Ezekiel, right? Like if you need the opportunity, all the bad feelings go away. So if you need the player and you need the talent, all of the concerns around, shunning the team for other teams, they end up going away too.
If the Saints decide to bring him in and he puts on the black and gold, all is forgiven. but until then, we do not need you. Go ahead.
Well, let me ask you about Granderson. If he can stay healthy a whole year, I think he has a tremendous upside, but it's mostly he's not healthy or consistent the whole year.
Yeah. I think that he gives you what the Saints would have asked Trey Hendrickson to do if Trey Hendrickson would have stayed in New Orleans. I think Carl Granderson is one of the reasons why the Saints were comfortable saying, no, go get a bigger role somewhere, because we're not going to pay you to have that role. Right? Because you're not going to have that role in New Orleans. They've got Marcus Davenport. They ended up investing in Peyton Turner. They had Carl Granderson, all that. They have Cam Jordan. Like, they weren't ever going to give Trey Hendrickson 900 plus defensive snaps. You know what I'm saying? So they weren't going to pay, $15 million a year for him to play that role. And I think Carl Granderson is one of the reasons why they were comfortable doing that. So I think that there is the piece of it that is him staying out on the field. But now that you have Peyton Turner back and hopefully he's able to play, I think you are able to maximize Carl Granderson's impact without having to have him out on the field as much. So I think that will probably end up aiding exactly what you're talking about in terms of being able to keep him healthy and therefore available as a part of that rotation.
Okay.
So when the Saints go to their NASCAR package, I'm seeing Davenport, Peyton Turner, Cam and to no Pagano as the forward. What are your thoughts on that? As
I
the
think that
possible
becomes
NASCAR package.
Yeah, I think that's a possible one. I wouldn't be surprised to see a guy like Tavia Street, who's a little bit more athletic, that can get into that defensive tackle role too. I think that Marcus Davenport is probably the one you move inside, and then you let Cam and Peyton Turner, and even in some cases, Granderson and Peyton Turner rush from the outside with Cam even on the sideline. And I'm not saying that because I think Cam needs to be on the sideline or anything like that. I just think you have that rotation now. Right. And you have the ability to, in the fourth quarter, have this offensive tackle that's played, 60 something snaps have to all of a sudden take on a whole new and fresh Cam Jordan at a different point, or a whole new and fresh Carl Granderson who has an entirely different pass rush plan than Cam Jordan. So you take advantage of that rotation and you utilize it. So I'm not like advocating for anybody starting over Cam Jordan, but I think you mix and match and you do all that. So I think that there will be several of those packages that are going to have those three edge rushers that end up, creating some interior pressure as well as the edge pressure over there. You'll have a few of those different looks for sure.
And I think it'll be wise for them to rotate Cam the first three quarters, like you said, to keep him fresh for the fourth and to save his legs for toward the end of the season. Because a lot last year, we had a lot of family members, a lot of you in Who That Nation, before Cam went on that tear. We're talking about get rid of Cam, cut Cam. He's washed up. But a lot of you change your mind and change your tune once you saw Cam got healthy and start being the Cam Jordan that he is. So I would love to see that. Now, the key to me is the man child who's opposite him. This is a contract year. Do the Saints pay him?
Yeah, I think he has to produce this year in order for that to happen, right? I don't think you give him the extension early. I think they picked up the 5th-year option, which was them showing, all right, there's a belief here that you can be this person again. 9.5 sacks last year is pretty good. Getting out on the field. We want to see you out on the field a little bit more, but need to see that production continue. The thing that I like about Davenport is that he impacts late in plays. He impacts late in drives. He impacts late in the game. He impacts in situational spots and 3rd and 4th down, stuff like that. So I think that all of that is stuff that ends up becoming really important in terms of what you're looking at for a guy like that. But I think that this year he has a lot of pressure on him. I think he's one of the players that has the most pressure on him going into 2022 because of being in that contract season.
Okay. Now, the one thing that I would like to see, and I'm sure a lot of people would like to see, is the return of our all-pro kicker, because those kickers we had last year, and family, you know exactly what I'm about to say, were god awful. They can go back to Home Depot. They can go back to Lowe's. I really don't care. And if any of you are watching, I'll say it again. You were god awful. And the people that you beat out for that position must have been horrible. Nah, I don't know how you feel, Ross, but that's just how I feel. I just see that's why we keep it real over here, baby.
Yeah, I'll go for it, yo. No, you lost games because of your kickers last year, or because of your lack of kicker last year, right? I mean, you lost the Giants game when the momentum stalled out with the missed field goal right before the Giants ended up pulling off that big comeback. You lost the Tennessee Titans game because it put you in a situation with the missed extra points that you had to go for it for 2 at the end of the game to tie, as opposed to just kicking the extra point for the win, which would have been the situation for them. The Atlanta Falcons game, right? You miss Will Lutz. And so I think that Will Lutz wins you games as a clutch kicker at the end of games, but he also wins you games as just a guy that you can trust to go out and kick field goals in the 3rd quarter. Right. That ends up, keeping that momentum going, particularly in front of the hometown and stuff like that. So I think that all of that, having Will Lutz back, if it wasn't for the fact that Michael Thomas was also coming back this season, expected to also come back this season, I think Will Lutz is probably the biggest addition that you make this offseason because of the fact that he has the ability to win you games just as somebody that can consistently kick an extra point.
Exactly. We couldn't even get that straight last year. It was hard to watch, man.
Yeah, I mean, they got to the point to where they were just going for 2 because they didn't trust the kickers to kick an extra point. And the Saints haven't converted a 2-point conversion for the last, like, it's double digits now. It's as if, 2-point conversion tries and fails. Like, they're 0 in double digits. I can't remember exactly what it is at the moment, but they're not great. They weren't great when it came to those plays. So
Ross, 2 questions. One, on the defensive side, is there any possibility Kawhi signs back with the Saints?
Yeah, I think so, right? Like, if you I think there's a couple of different variations of the way that happens. There's he had the workout with the Jets, and the Jets haven't signed him yet. If they keep muddling around and everything like that, and he may already have an offer from the Saints. We don't know, what those behind door conversations have been and all that. But if he doesn't get the opportunity elsewhere to have more of a starting role, and he's willing to take whatever role he's going to get in New Orleans, and I think that there's the reality that it happens there. And I also think that, like, look, I mean, it's unfortunate, but it's the truth. Like, the biggest equalizer in all of the NFL is injuries, and you're about to go into training camp and injuries happen. And so if the Saints end up in a situation to where they're in need at the linebacker position, that doesn't necessarily mean losing a starter, right? That could be one of those depth pieces. It could be, I don't want to say anybody's name because I don't want to voodoo up some injury for somebody or anything like that. But, like, even some of the reserve guys and things like that, to where you just want to keep the numbers up. And then I think that that's another opportunity to where the Saints are maybe willing to, give Kwon Alexander a little bit more based on, in terms of closer to what maybe him and his team want or something like that to bring him back. But there's a clear love between the organization and the player and the organization, that if the opportunity presents itself and the numbers are right, that they could get it done. But I think that the role has to be something that Kwon Alexander is willing to play, and maybe is willing to not find out until the season begins.
Okay. Right. And my other question is, you usually don't see this in the pros. You see a lot in college. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on the co-defensive coordinator situation?
Oh, great question. Yeah, I think it's interesting because it's really 3 defensive coordinators to an extent, right? It's not just the between Chris Richard, who's also the secondary coach, and Ryan Nielsen, who's also the defensive line coach, but you've got Dennis Allen calling the defensive plays while those guys are installing and getting things ready. Now, Chris Richard has done some situational play calling, particularly in the red zone. Saints were excellent in the red zone last year, and Chris Richard was a big part of that. So was coverage as a whole. Paul Sinadivo with the interception early on to open up the season in the red zone at one point against Aaron Rodgers. And so I think it's interesting. I've had my reservations around it, but after getting a better understanding of what the division of labor is going to be, then it has made a little bit more sense. It's worked before, and it also hasn't worked before. So, I mean, there's examples either way. And so I think that the thing that helps the Saints so much in this situation is that these are guys that are already familiar with the team, already familiar with the scheme, already familiar with the head coach, and already familiar with the players. I'd be a little bit more concerned if you were bringing somebody in as a co-defensive coordinator that wasn't with the team last year, or even both defensive coordinators coming in that weren't with the team last year. We saw an example of that-ish, kind of, with the Minnesota Vikings here recently. And so I think that becomes a part of where I would be a little bit more concerned. But I think that the familiarity, the cohesion, the continuity are things that are going to help that maybe go a little bit more a little bit more cleanly, right? A little bit more smoothly. And I don't think that ego is going to be an issue. I've heard some people or seen some people kind of speculate that, it might cause some issues in terms of like one of these guys wanting to get a bigger role at one point or whatever. They wouldn't have taken the co-defensive coordinator role if they didn't want the co-defensive coordinator role. Exactly. They wouldn't be there. You know what I mean? And so I think that it can work, but it's going to be a really, really close thing to keep an eye out on throughout the season. Right. The good news is that you also have 3 coaches on the field. You got Cam Jordan, you got Demario Davis, and you've got Tyrann Mathieu. And I think that really, really helps as well.
Okay.
So Rose, are we overlooking or undervaluing Kaden Ellis?
Man, you said you've been listening. You said you've been following me for a couple of years, right? So you already know. You already know how I feel about Kaden. I think Kaden is a very, very good player, and I think that right now he has a clear role both on defense as well as on special teams. It's just that you don't see his defensive role in the field very often because modern day NFL, you don't use a lot of strong side linebackers these days. You use a lot of nickel packages where you have 5 defensive backs as opposed to 3 linebackers. Right. But when they come out there with 3 linebackers, Caden's going to be the guy on the field, I believe. That's going to be there. I think DeMarco ends up rotating in at some of those other more coverage focused positions, but Caden's ability to be able to rush the passer, you'll think back to last year, the pick 6 by Malcolm Jenkins, which was caused by the pressure by Caden on Mac Jones. His ability to do that, his ability to be impactful in the run game and sort of move laterally and be able to scrape and climb the line of scrimmage is something that's really, really impressive. He has really impressive athleticism as well. And he's a fantastic special teamer. I think he's probably one of the guys that if he continues to be able to pick up the trajectory that he's been able to pick up, being healthy, being on the field and everything like we saw last year, I think he ends up being a guy like Craig Robertson, who was, like that special teams captain, kind of guy, right? And I think that Caden Ellis has that role that he could potentially swing into.
Okay. Now let me ask you this, Ross. At the end of the season, did you have any inclination or rumors that Sean was stepping away from the Saints?
No. It was something that took a lot of people by surprise, big time. It really, like, the speculation and stuff like that really didn't start until it was like the bubbling started to happen, when there was the conversation around, hey, Sean Payton hasn't really committed to coming back in 2022. And then all of a sudden the speculation kind of started, but it was something that took a lot of people by surprise. And I'm sure that there were others that, there were the national insiders of the world that probably heard some rumblings or maybe knew a little bit more and would kind of talk about timeline, could probably talk about timeline a little bit better than I can. But, from this perspective, it was not something that we really saw coming. Speaking for myself and speaking for a couple of folks that I've talked to, it was a bit of a surprise, but then it all made sense at the same time. I don't know if that makes sense, but like once we talked to Sean, all of a sudden everything kind of made sense, right. And stuff like that. But it wasn't something that a lot of people saw coming. That's for sure.
So staying with that coaching thing, we're moving to Dennis Allen. What are you hearing, Ross, around NFL and far as his peers about his second time around coaching? Do they feel he would be successful this time, or what are the thoughts or just rumors about him far as coaching?
I think what you usually hear is that he has a better chance to succeed in New Orleans than he had in Oakland at the time when he was with the Raiders. He got an opportunity here to maybe. I think the thing that's really helpful for him is that, like, back then he got affixed to a quarterback, right? Derek Carr was, the drafted guy when he came in, or they drafted Derek Carr soon after he took over and things like that. So his opportunity was sort of tied to the quarterback. This time around, Dennis Allen isn't really tied to Jameis Winston, even though he brought Jameis Winston back. Jameis Winston was brought in 2 years ago by Sean Payton to, work and develop and learn and work with Drew Brees and Pete Carmichael and at the time Joe Lombardi and all that. And so he has a little bit of a longer, I don't want to call it a leash. I kind of hate when people talk about it like that, but he has a little bit of a different runway with Jameis, knowing that if Jameis doesn't pan out, for instance, which I don't think will be the case, but if Jameis doesn't pan out, then it's not really a reflection on Dennis Allen. Then he gets to go and pick his next quarterback, right? So then he gets that opportunity. So he has a chance here before being affixed to a quarterback. And I think that just increases the longevity in terms of his opportunity going into the next couple of years. And I think that the defense that he has built, that he has sort of been an architect of, is something that also gives him a lot more of an opportunity in New Orleans. He has his defense in New Orleans that he has built and orchestrated since he took over in 2015 as defensive coordinator when they moved on from Rob Ryan. And so, like, I think that becomes the other big piece too. So I think that what you hear about him most is that he has the tools necessary to be able to be successful in this other opportunity. A lot of people believe that he deserved the opportunity, whether it was with the Saints or someone else. We saw him get a lot of interviews over the course of the past few seasons, right? And so I think that the consensus is that he has the pieces, he deserves the opportunity, and that he will probably have a little bit of a longer runway here, at least multiple season opportunities, unless things go absolutely, horrifically in 2022. But it just doesn't feel like that'll be the case.
All right, one more question. I know he did an 8-hour interview with the Saints, but why hasn't Eric Bieniemy got a head coaching job?
It is something that is still so shocking to me. Like the fact that Brian Flores is the linebacker, he's a position coach, he's like an assistant coach right now, is just wild to me. I think that, like, the black coach issue in the NFL is one that is terrible. And I think only going to get worse before it gets any kind of better. I don't know. I don't really know where it gets better just yet. And so I think that, moves like what the Raiders just made, where they, bring in the NFL's first Black female president just a day ago. I think that those types of moves end up having a trickle down effect that impacts the opportunities for Black coaches that, maybe are looking for more shots and things like that. And Eric Bieniemy, who I almost said Brian Bieniemy, shout out to Brian Bieniemy though, but Eric Bieniemy, who, obviously deserves an opportunity out there, hasn't been able to find it yet. I think he'll find it eventually, but I don't know what it is. Like it's because it's not just him. Like if it was just him, then you would be able to pinpoint it and say, okay, well, maybe it's an interview thing. Maybe it's an attitude thing. Maybe it's that kind of stuff. But I mean, when you look at, all these other coaches that aren't getting opportunities or that are on shorter leashes or aren't getting the full run that they deserve and things like that, then like there's just evidence out there that shows you that the NFL is just not really in a great place with its hiring practices just yet. And, as much as we want to tout progress, you can look at this year's coaching cycle and see that there hasn't been any. So I think he's impacted by that for sure.
All right. Okay. And what is the health of James? Is he fully back yet, or?
He's made a lot of progress. I don't think that we've heard that he's medically like fully cleared just yet. I don't think that we will hear that until maybe training camp gets really underway or anything like that. But I think that, when you look at him now, he's working without the brace. He's on the move. He's throwing while on the run, which is something we haven't really seen from him yet. That was a big part of kind of the next step in his recovery. So I think that he's on pace. He's a couple weeks removed here from reporting to training camp, like 18 days away from reporting to training camp. So, there's only more opportunity for him to continue to get better and continue to progress. But his progress so far has been remarkably impressive. The fact that he was not only present, but participating in OTAs at all, that was the story. You know what I mean? Like that's huge, the fact that he was out there. And so I think that he's in a good place. I don't think you'll see as much of a ramp up for him as the ramp up that I expect to see for Michael Thomas, where Michael Thomas isn't necessarily out there full go right away. But I think Jameis is going to do everything that he can to be out there and ready to go. I mean, he's already told everybody during the schedule release, he's like, you need me to put on pads right now and go out there. I'll do it. So he's ready to be out there on the field too. Right.
So you think Andy Dalton is a good, solid backup?
Yeah, I think so. I think that puts a situation. I think that puts you in a situation where you have a really, really good, not only backup option on the field, but he gives you a veteran quarterback that can work with Jameis on the sideline. Here's what I'm seeing from the sideline. Here's what I'm seeing in these photos, and be the Chase Daniel, the Luke McCown, the Teddy Bridgewater that Drew Brees also had, right? So I think that he gives you all that. And the other thing that I really, really like is that the second team in practice gets a starting NFL quarterback to practice with. And these guys that are fighting for roster spots during training camp, that are fighting for jobs as human beings, they get to work with an NFL caliber quarterback as opposed to a backup quarterback or a guy that's still learning the position or whatever, while they're trying to go out there and show, hey, I deserve a job with the New Orleans Saints or maybe with one of these other 53 teams, these other 31 teams. And so I think that that's the other thing that I think is valuable, not only for those guys that are just looking for jobs before the season begins, but practice throughout the season ends up benefiting from that as well.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Ross, can you hang a little while longer or you good? You good? Okay. All right, just wanted to make sure, baby. When we gotta take care of you, baby. Your family, we gotta take care of you. Gotta take care of you. Gotta take care of you. Now, recently, there was a you tweeted about the recent rankings of every team's roster. Now, and when I saw it, I almost fell out my chair because I'm trying to figure out how a team that has 3 players who are ranked in the top 10 at their positions is credited with having the 21st ranked roster in the entire National Football League. I don't know who's making this list. Must be a Falcon fan, Carolina Panther fan, or Buccaneer fan. But there's no way that the Saints have the 21st best roster in the entire National Football League.
Look, no, they don't. Ben Lindsay over at PFF ranked them with the 11th best roster, which evaluated projected starters, strengths, weaknesses, X factors. I think that's a better spot for them in terms of their roster. I think that they're a team that is either on the cusp of top 10 or is a top 10 roster. I think that, positional value will tell you that the quarterback could potentially impact that depending upon how you feel about Jameis Winston. It changes everything, right? Because he's a quarterback, right? And so he's the highest valued player and position on your roster. So I think there's like something to say about just positional valuation there. But man, look, that 21st ranking, it's list season, y'all. It's list season, right? People know the New Orleans Saints fan base by now. And they know that, like, if you come sideways at the Who Dat Nation, that the Who Dat Nation is going to show up in your mentions. And that's helpful. That's helpful in this business. And so I sometimes I look at some of those things and I say, I look at that. I look at the quarterback rankings that had, Jameis Winston behind Daniel Jones, who hasn't done like literally a thing in the NFL. and you've ranked a 5,000-yard passer behind Daniel Jones and Zach Wilson, who has barely thrown a pass in the NFL. I look at those types of things and I kind of go, okay, well, that's the same crowd that, talks about selling the Pelicans. That's the same crowd that talks about, the Saints needing to move on from, X, Y, and Z, or Michael Thomas and all of that, right? Like that's that same crowd and stuff like that. And like they're doing their jobs, like, and it's engagement, it's fun conversation. But I think that the thing that it tells you is that the fan base is excited. And I think that that's the thing you learn from a list like that. You don't really learn that they're the 21st roster in the NFL. You don't take that away and say, okay, well, that must be true because some guy said it. I think instead what you get from that is you see how excited the fan base is. You see how passionate the fan base is. And this is a fan base that just lost its head coach of 15 years, the year after losing its Hall of Fame quarterback of 15 years, that's moving into a brand new era of football that sometimes in some fan bases would potentially make them concerned about their team. And instead, this fan base is ecstatic about that team. And I think that tells you a lot about what this means for the city of New Orleans, Gulf Coast, and what that New Orleans Saints fan base is, worldwide.
Right. Who that to you, Big Q? Thank you, baby.
Big Q,
thank you, my brother. What's going on, my brother? Thank you for the love, my brother. Appreciate you. You know that all the time. Thank you for coming through. But yeah, so Ross, let me ask you this also. Let's go to the offensive side of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Now the Saints we've loaded up on paper. This is the only thing that scares me. On paper, looking at the Saints, we should have one of the most explosive offenses in the league. But of course, we know paper does not win games.
Right. And
I go back to the Philadelphia Eagles that offseason when they signed I'm the opposite wide, and they had I believe T.O. came in then, if I'm not mistaken, and everyone was like they're going to be world beaters, and they felt dead on their face. That's the only that's why I'm excited, but at the same time I'm cautious because I need to see it all come together in training camp, in the preseason, and I don't need the Saints hitting full stride the first month of the season. I need them to gradually get into it. So at the end of the season, they're playing their best football. Right. I'm not saying I want us to start the season off 1-3 or 0-4, which we will not, by the way. I got us going 4-0. Call me a homie if you want, but that's what it is. We're going 4-0. That's it. And if you got a problem with it, it's just too bad. Deal with it. But what's your thought on that, my brother?
Yeah, I think, one of the things I talked about the other day is I think that a lot of people will want to put all of it on Jameis Winston, right? Like if Jameis Winston plays well, then the Saints will have a winning record in 2022. It's more than that. It's the roster, right? The roster has to gel. It's a really, really good roster. The Saints have done a good job. Dennis Allen did a good job building where he coaches and building for those who coach elsewhere. He's done a really, really good job with that roster and putting some attention all around it. Mickey, Gail, Kai, like they've all done a great job with helping to build all of this. And so you're now in a situation to where instead of having a roster that's elevated by its scheme, you have the personnel that can help to elevate the scheme, right? And be elevated by the scheme. So there's a little bit more complementary in terms of system and personnel. And that's a good place for a first year head coach, right? First year with this team. And so I think that's a good place to be. But the big thing is, can the coaching staff lead the roster to developing its chemistry quickly and over time, sustain that? And can you do the things that make you successful at the end of the season, right? Which is set up tendencies early that you break later. That is something that Sean Payton was an absolute master of doing. Dennis Allen, a master doing on the defensive side of the ball. Can they replicate it on the offensive side of the ball at Pete Carmichael, who, has been doing this with Sean Payton for years and years and years. Like, he's an architect of this offense as we know it. So I do think that he can, but can they do it all together, the coaching staff and the roster? So the roster has to be able to gel. The chemistry has to be able to build and solidify over the course of the 17-game season, which is a bit of a tough schedule. The late bye week stinks. The travel to London stinks. Like, all of those things are tough. But as long as they're able to figure all of that out, that's going to be the key to the Saints' success in 2022, is their ability to operate as a unit, which they've shown that they can do culture-wise time and time again. Even when the culture was shaken a little bit, they were able to get that fixed and get what they needed to do. But the guy that was in the building that helped that happen, he's not in the building anymore. So can this coaching staff still lead that type of cohesion throughout the season? That's going to be the big X factor for me. But I think
so with that being said, Ross, what is your prediction far as the Saints wins and losses?
Yeah, I think I put them at it was either 10-7 or 11-6. Like, I have them as a team that is better than last year's team. It's hard for me to look at them and say that they're going to be 9-8 or worse if they're not starting 58 different players, 4 different quarterbacks, and 4 kickers that aren't their kicker. You know what I mean? So I have them as a winning team, but that's all contingent upon the team being able to overcome adversity, which they've done so incredibly well since 2017. They have been so good at overcoming adversity. So they have to be able to do that. And they have to be able to be in a situation here going into 2022 to where that roster gets to measure.
Right. And also the question is, when you look at this team, is there one particular area where you kind of say, we may need to improve? I'm kind of skeptical about, or
there's a couple. I mean, tight end, defensive interior, running back, depending upon what happens there. Like, there's certainly those spots that you're going to look for them to really address and pay attention to over the course of training camp, but there's time to do it. It's not too late or anything like that. Like, they have the time to be able to do it. And maybe it's adding a new player, or maybe it's somebody that we're not thinking of, or somebody that we've talked about, like a Shy Tuttle, or somebody that really just like steps into that next level of his development and is that guy. Like, maybe Tony Jones Jr. takes a huge step forward and is the guy that we saw week 1 in Green Bay for an entire season. We don't know that can't happen. Just because it doesn't sound like it will doesn't mean it won't. Right. Yeah. And you know that as a coach, right? Just because you don't think it might happen, like, the only time that it happens is if you don't think it'll happen. And every one of these players thinks it'll happen. And so, we can walk through this locker room and say, are the New Orleans Saints going to win the NFC South? And I can ask 90 players and I'm going to get 90 yeses every single time, right? Like, that's going to be the attitude of those players. And I think that helps with development and stepping forward.
Okay.
Now let's go back to Pete Carmichael, because we had this discussion that's my brother, man. He's speaking with his heart. He's not speaking in reality, But Pete, a lot of the family members are kind of nervous about Pete Carmichael taking over. But what I'm trying to help them understand, go back to 2011, 2012. I believe 12 was when Sean was suspended for the whole season, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
And Pete was the main play caller. The Saints had a top 5 offense. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to tell the family, and also every step of the way in building this offense and creating this offense, the man right next to Sean and actually helping Sean come up with the plays or introducing plays to Sean was Pete Carmichael. Mm-hmm. So I think we're going to be fine with Pete Carmichael. What's your assessment of that?
Yeah, look, I think it was Jeff Duncan wrote a piece about Pete Carmichael being like the silent killer or something like that, silent assassin. And I think that's who he is. Like, Pete Carmichael has always been so unassuming. He's been like, no, I'm cool right here. Like, I'm having a good time as the offensive coordinator. I'm doing good and everything. And it's not like he hasn't also called plays since 2012 as well, right? Like, he's also called plays throughout games at certain points, everything like that. Like Sean has looked at him situationally. Sean has looked at him as an offensive coordinator, just like you would, right? So I think that all of that kind of speaks into Pete Carmichael's benefit. I think the other thing too is that if you look at 2011, you look at 2012, you'll say, well, he had so much talent on that offense. He has a lot of talent on this offense too. A lot of talent. He doesn't have Drew Brees. That's, you know, and that's a part of the equation. But he has somebody that's able to put the ball downfield the way that Drew Brees was able to at that time, in terms of pushing the ball downfield, accuracy, all these other things, short and intermediate area, precision, timing, all that stuff comes with reps. All that stuff comes with, you know, Jameis Winston development. And so we'll have to see how that goes. You're not going to get Drew Brees out of Jameis Winston. You shouldn't want Drew Brees out of Jameis Winston either, right? So you build and you architect this offense around the talent that you have, and that's something that the Saints team has done so incredibly well. It's not a New England Patriot system to where you get drafted, you come in, you make the roster as a 53, as a third running back, you get handed a binder that says RB3, and you said, okay, here's what you do, right? The Saints have always instead built around the strength of their personnel, and they'll do that again. And Pete Carmichael is absolutely going to be somebody that this whole coaching staff, for the most part, in terms of the people that have rolled over, like, these are still Sean Payton disciples. These are still people that have worked and learned from Sean Payton's ways, and that you still hear a lot of Sean Payton in Zach Strief, in Dennis Allen, in, you know, Ryan Nielsen and Chris Richard and Pete Carmichael and all these guys. Like, all those principles don't just disappear all of a sudden. They get you know, a little nuance, they get changed, they get, you know, a little bit, they get tinkered with a little bit, but they don't disappear. And so I think that, you know, like, Pete Carmichael is going to be in a good position to be able to be successful in 2022. It's just going to be, you know, what we talked about, right? Can the roster gel? Can the playbook get picked up by every, you know, all the parties and everything? Can you have that type of cohesion and communication and just sort of connection between quarterback and wide receiver, between Jameis and Michael Thomas, like you had between Drew Brees and Michael Thomas, where they saw the same things develop on the field at the same time? Like, there's so many of those elements that we don't talk about that are, you know, kind of like into the weeds that have to go right. But I think that they're in a good position with Pete Carmichael to be able to find those things and be able to build on them throughout the season.
Okay. Now, me personally, when Pete first turned down the offensive coordinator position and the head coaching position, and he was thinking about stepping away, do you think that had anything to do with the handshake between Sean Payton and Tom Brady, possibly going to Miami with Sean?
No, I don't think so. I think that maybe if that would have been that public at that time, that we probably would have heard about it a little bit sooner. I just think that, like, that's a situation for Pete Carmichael, who has, like, been very comfortable in his role for a long time, to where it was kind of like, all right, I've been here from the very beginning, or in a different role for some of it, but I've been here from the very beginning with Sean. Sean's leaving. What's my next step? And you take your time to figure that out on your timeline. You don't do it on somebody else's timeline. So he might have just been considering that, I think, maybe. It's speculation on my part. But he might have just been considering that when they asked him the first time, and then he came, and then maybe he needed his time to sort of figure things out. Maybe it wasn't necessarily that he turned down the opportunity, more than it was I need a little bit of time before I can say yes or no. So give me a second, right? And then we just heard something a little bit different. Like, that kind of stuff happens all the time. Those little details, you know what I mean? And so that could have been the situation. But, you know, he's here now, so damn.
That's it. He's here now, and I'm happy he's here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on here, man, I don't defend Jameis Winston on here. I defend him on camera, because I don't know what it is, like the disrespect, and it's almost like the hatred, or that it's almost like they're praying for this young man's downfall.
Mm-hmm.
It's been 3 years removed from Tampa Bay, and all you hear is 30 for 30 when it was actually 33 touchdowns and 5,000 yards, which only a handful of quarterbacks have done, and one of them did it 3 times, and he's a future Hall of Famer.
Right.
But they totally look over that. So during the first 5 games last season, Pro Football Focus reported that Jameis Winston was the leading quarterback in red zone rating in the entire NFL. And earlier this season, Jameis said, I can do whatever your favorite quarterback can do.
I love that quote.
And he was actually proving that last year until he got hurt, in the Tampa Bay game with that illegal horse collar tackle. But, payback, but what's your thing? What's your thought about the disrespect that Jameis getting, like on the quarterback list? Like you mentioned earlier, some of the people they had in front of Jameis, I mean, it's like totally ridiculous. Like you said, this young man's passed for 5,000 yards. He's been rookie of the year. He's made a Pro Bowl. I mean, what more does the kid have to do? I know what he's going to do this year. He's going to shut them all, excuse my language, the hell up.
That's the hope, right? And
yeah,
I think he has the talent, and he has the talent around him to be able to do it as well. I do think that people gravitate a little bit too much to the 30 interception season. I think the other thing that we don't talk about enough is the Bruce Arians effect, the no risk it, no biscuit effect of his first year with several quarterbacks was their career high in interceptions. Tom Brady was on pace to be, to throw his career high of interceptions in his first year with Bruce Arians as well. Until Tom Brady, who has the clout and has the cachet to be able to say, hey fam, I'm not running your offense anymore. Right. We're not doing this. We're doing it my way. Everything, like Tom Brady can do that because he's the greatest quarterback to play a game. And so I think that, when you put, Jameis wasn't in that situation with Bruce Arians, who, Bruce Arians just wanted to get his quarterback in the building. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I think that, there's kind of the lame duck approach to that season by Bruce Arians a little bit. There's and then there's, still what he did otherwise, right? I think you look at the quality of throws from last year as well. He didn't throw a ton of passes, but out of all the quarterbacks that threw 100 or more passes in 2020-21, he had the second highest big time throw ranking across Pro Football Focus and stuff. So it's not like he was nursing anything. It's not like he was in a situation where he was only throwing, dump offs or anything like that. Like, he had an efficient season, still throwing in the tight windows and attacking downfield. Like we saw what he and Deontay Hardy were able to do together. We saw what he and Marquez Callaway were able to do together. Wanted to see the Marquez Callaway part maybe come on a little bit quicker in the regular season than it did, but still, you got it. Right. And so I look at those things, and I think that I use those things to maybe inform me a little bit more about Jameis, right? Like year over year projections, it's always going to be shaky, right? Like things are always going to change the next year and everything like that. But certainly going back to 2019 and trying to transpose that when he's an entirely new system, when you're, in a proven situation that has been a negative situation for first year quarterbacks with Bruce Arians and all that, like, it's hard to just take that and say, well, that's who Jameis Winston is now. And it just doesn't make sense to me to do it. And I think the other factor that I just want to mention real quick too is Ronald Curry. And, and you want to talk about why Pete Carmichael might have said, hey, I'll come back. Y'all come back for this. It might be Ronald Curry, right? Like Ronald Curry has taken sort of that trajectory as being a guy that's come in to help with wide receivers, to being a quarterback coach, to now being in a situation where he's quarterback coach, pass game coordinator. He's on an offensive coordinator track and everything. Maybe that's the situation with Pete Carmichael. So he was like, oh, hold on, wait, Ronald Curry's in the pipeline? Well, let me come and help. Let me come and work with him and get him ready for you for next year or something like that, right? Like that's my tinfoil hat theory, because I just think Ronald Curry is the truth. And I think that he puts you in a situation with his work with Jameis Winston, and you saw not only his work with Jameis Winston, but his work with Taysom Hill, his work with Travis Simeon, and his work with Ian Book all showed last year in terms of getting 4 quarterbacks ready for the season at different points and everything. Ronald Curry makes a big difference for you too. And you didn't have that type of quarterback coach relationship in Tampa between Bruce Arians, quarterback coach, and Jameis Winston. Right now, you have this real good connection between Jameis Winston, Ronald Curry, and Pete Carmichael, who have 3 years invested in one another at this point, at some capacity or another. That I think that makes a huge difference for you as well, because you're not just getting the coaching from Dennis Allen. You're not just getting the coaching from offensive coordinators. You're getting that coaching directly from your quarterback coach, that relationship that you're building with your quarterback coach. That's also helping to draw up plays for you. That's a really, really good situation to be in.
Okay. Well, Coach and Ross, what we going to do now? We're going to name our top 7 teams in the NFC preseason right now.
Oh, okay.
So, family, come on. Name your top 7 teams in the NFC right now. I already got a head start on y'all, so I'm going to help everybody out. I'm going to get you started so y'all can talk about my list. At number 7, I have the Arizona Cardinals. I'm still high on the quarterback, so I have the Cardinals. Number 6, the Bucks. That's right. They number 6. They will stay beneath us because they are beneath us. All right. Number 5. How about them Cowboys? I got the Cowboys at number 5 because of the NFC East. It's all of them and the Eagles, but I think the Cowboys will definitely win the NFC East. Number 4. Who that nation? I'm not a homer. I keep it real. I'm telling you like it right now. I got us ranked 4. Of course, we'll move up as the season continues. Number 3, the Philadelphia Eagles. They have had a great offseason and they're definitely loaded up. And number 2, the team that was in the NFC Championship game last year, the San Francisco 49ers. And of course, the number 1 team, the defending champs, until somebody knocks them off. So that's my list. Mm-hmm. What about you, Coach?
Oh, well, number 7, I got the Cardinals.
Okay.
Number 6, the Bucks. Number 5, the Cowboys. Number 4, the Philadelphia Eagles. Number 3, San Francisco 49ers. Number 2, homegrown New Orleans Saints. And number 1, the LA Rams.
It's a good list, Coach. That's good. All right. Ross, what you got for us? Oh, you want me to come back to you?
No. I'm all good.
You ready? Okay.
Yep. So for me, I've got number 7, the San Francisco 49ers. I do like their roster, but Trey Lance is a huge question mark for me. We haven't seen him, so I don't know what they have at the quarterback spots.
Is he starting?
Well, he's better than Jimmy Garoppolo. So if it's Jimmy Garoppolo starting, then they come off my top 7. It's that simple for me.
Do you really believe he's better than Garoppolo?
Yeah, I mean, he can't be worse.
I think Jimmy G gets a bad rap, man. I don't think he's that bad. Well, okay.
No, it's good. It's good. Like somebody outside his mama got to believe in him. So I'm glad somebody does.
Jimmy G. So if you're looking, I believe in you, man. Not too many people do, but okay, Rose, you can finish.
No, you're good. You're good. It's all about the conversation. So I got San Francisco at 7. I don't know what they got at quarterback right now. And I don't know what's going to happen with Deebo Samuel either. So that's going to be wild. Number 6, I got the Philadelphia Eagles. I just have my questions around Jalen Hurts as well. So these are still good rosters. These are still playoff teams. You know what I mean? These are still playoff teams in this case. But for me, Jimmy G didn't put them in the Super. They got to the Super Bowl despite Jimmy G because of a good defense and a good run game. So I'm not gonna give him the Super Bowl treatment just yet. Because that was the case, they would have done it every year Jimmy G was a quarterback if he was the deciding factor. But these are still playoff teams, right? Like these are still NFC playoff teams, 7-6, but they're the ones for me that have the biggest quarterback questions. I have the New Orleans Saints at 5 right now. I think that they climb beyond that, but I'm kind of doing this with playoff seeding as well. I expect them to probably very likely finish 2nd in the division, just in terms of win total, because Tampa's got a pretty cupcake schedule this year. Number 4, I've got the Dallas Cowboys. I like what they've done, man. I really do. Even with the loss of Amari Cooper, they've made such wise decisions at wide receiver at this point that I really like what they do, and I really like Dak Prescott. I mean, these top 5 teams are the ones that have maybe the best quarterback situation in a very weak NFC. So that's why I go like New Orleans, Dallas, and then I'll go Tampa at 3. I'm not going to put them at 1 or 2. I just have some big question marks about their offensive line on the interior. I like Shaq Mason. Shaq Mason was a good signing for them on the interior, but is he going to translate to the new system from Buffalo, right? Like that's going to be my big thing. Who's going to be the left guard? We know Tom Brady crumbles with interior pressure, so having those question marks on the interior are pretty big. And what does Chris Godwin look like in 2022 coming back off that ACL injury? And how quickly does he come back from it? So that's my thing with Tampa. Green Bay at 2. I think they need some help at wide receiver. Maybe Christian Watson gives them that, but man, that defense is just so talented. Rashawn Gary is so slept on, and there's all the other pieces that are available over on that team. And you probably have maybe the better quarterback situation, despite all of the drama that surrounds him and stuff like that. I think that I really like what Green Bay is going to look like in 2022. And then the Rams, just like you said, everything from Aaron Donald to Jalen Ramsey and in between on defense, everything from, Cooper Kupp to Matt Stafford on offense. That Matt Stafford trade was such a good move and such a smart move by Los Angeles. I love the way that they have built their roster, and so I like what they can do. I don't think that they repeat. I don't even think they get to the Super Bowl this year, but I think that they're the best NFC team roster wise going into the season, at least.
Okay. And then from the family members, Kerman Perkins. All right, boo. We see he has the Rams 1, Bucks 2. He's got the Cowboys 3. He's got the Cardinals 4. You tripping with that one, but the Packers 5, 49-6. And of course, being the Saints hater, you'll put us 7, but it's all good. I respect your list.
I like it. I mean, look, I've seen a lot of folks have the Saints as the 7th best team, not roster wise, but the 7th best team in the division. That's still a playoff team. Like, that's the thing. Like, I kind of did division finishes for mine and things like that. So that kind of factored into the order. But I think, you put them in the top 7, like that's still a playoff team. And I think that's where they deserve to be.
Okay. All right, Ross, we're about to go to one of the most famous segments of the show that all the family members love. Family, it's time for Coach's Corner with Coach Rock. So, Coach Rock, me and Ross gonna let you take it away, my brother.
All right.
Coach's Corner.
So tonight we're going to talk about Coach Arthur Lee Shell Jr., better known as Coach Art Shell. Coach Shell was born November 26, 1946, played at Maryland State College. He was drafted in 1968 as a 3rd-round pick. Within a short time, he was widely recognized as one of the premier offensive linemen in the NFL. He also played with none other than Gene Upshaw, who played left guard, which went in the Hall of Fame in 1987. Coach Shell, he played in 8 Pro Bowl games, 23 postseason contests, 8 AFL, AFC championships. He won 2 Super Bowls. In 1989, he became the first black head coach, and he compiled a record of 54 wins and 38 losses. He was named AFC Coach of the Year in 1990. The Raiders won the AFC West Division Championship with a 12-4 record, becoming the first Afro-American coach to lead a team to a conference championship. In 1994, after a 9-7 season, Al Davis fired Coach Shell, and he said it was later called one of the biggest mistakes he made. After leaving the Raiders, he went on to position coach with the Kansas City Chiefs and the Atlanta Falcons before serving as senior vice president of NFL in charge of football operations. Coach Shell was a 2-time Super Bowl champion, 2-time first-time All-Pro, 8-time Pro Bowl, the NFL 1970 All-Decade Team, and the NFL's 100th Anniversary All-Team. So we want to give a shout-out, rest in peace, to none other than the legendary Coach Art Shell.
Another great job as usual, Coach. Great job, man. And the Raiders continue to make history, as they made history just, I believe, today or yesterday, hiring the first black female president. So, congrats to her, and congrats for the Raiders for being pioneers in that area.
Yeah.
So with that, Coach and Ross, I'm gonna give you guys parting words. The man of the hour, Mr. Ross Jackson. Again, Ross, on behalf of the Keeping It Real Who Dat family, want to thank you for spending part of your evening with us, taking time out to come by and show us love, man. You're officially a family member. You're welcome here anytime. You don't even have to call, man. Just ring the doorbell, But again, man, we appreciate you, man. We really do, man. And we look forward to you gracing us with your presence again. You got anything, Coach?
Man, I just enjoyed it. Like I told you, I was a sponge. And what I really enjoyed about it, me coming from the coaching side and get to sit down and listen to Ross, who's on the other side, and just kind of absorb this to learn, to become better at it, and
right.
Who better than Ross to sit here and kind of sit here and pick his brain and learn, man, Right. Like they say, iron sharpens iron, man. So just to sit here and learn from him, to move forward to get better at this, man.
Right.
I appreciate it. I enjoyed it tonight, man.
Thank you, brother. I
really
appreciate
did.
that.
We really enjoyed it. Man, thank you. And thank you to the Who Dat family. Everybody on Facebook, everybody on YouTube, everybody on Twitter. Thank you guys for coming through and sharing your evening with us, with myself, Coach Rock, and the one and only Mr. Ross Jackson. All right, we got one comment before we get out of here. I'm trying to get everybody in. See, y'all wait to the end to get them in. Let me see. What's the comment? Who is this trying to get in? Well, guess what? I can't get you. All right. Okay. Let me see. Let's see, Mr. I really enjoyed your company too, bro. You're an awesome dude, bro. Keep up the good work. He's speaking to you, Ross.
I appreciate you, family. Appreciate you, Randy. Thank you, man.
Yes, man.
We appreciate you, Randy. Thank you very much.
Reggie.
With that being said, family, for Ross Jackson, for Coach Rock, I'm Dolph 17, saying peace. And you know what we always go out with. Who that?
Who that?
And love. We see y'all Wednesday.